You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who have been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and then definitely follow them on Instagram for all the information that you need, because I'm sure that's where you follow us as well, at oklahomahof. Let's get into today's episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode down at Bedford's. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, this is the beautiful background because we're down at Bedford. So if you need any camera stuff, prints, stuff like that, do that. Check them out. So my guest today is another Brit. I feel great saying that. Kind of similar story to me, but a different sport. Chris O'Hare is on the podcast, all the way from Scotland, but now resides in Tulsa. Thanks for coming down to Oklahoma City, mate.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. When do you do a lot of podcast interviews?
Mostly just on my kind of interviews, and I have some kind of people I grew up with who are doing it.
Okay.
And so kind of have a good chat with them, but it's normally sitting on my couch at home on the laptop.
Yeah, Zoom in with everyone back home and 6-hour difference and stuff like that. Well, great, mate. Let's start with, obviously, from Scotland. Tell us about where you grew up and high school and growing up and stuff like that.
Grew up in a small village just outside of Edinburgh. I went to Peebles High School, and I've been running pretty much since I was at primary school, competitively since I was in high school. Okay. And it brought me out to Tulsa.
Yeah. So what got you into running from a young age?
My older brother's 3 years older than me, and he was they have one or two races in the summer every year, and so the cross country team assembles 2 weeks before and dissolves immediately after. And so the kind of couple of weeks leading into these races, my older brother was running, and I just wanted to do everything that he wanted to do or do everything he was doing, and wanted to be like him. So kind of went along and could keep up with the older boys, and then the next again year they couldn't keep up. So it was
just a natural gift. Then something you just naturally took to, and wasn't necessarily something that was like, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to be a runner. It was, I'm going to do this because I want to follow my older brother, and then you just figure out that you're much better than he is, better than everybody else.
And I was always, I never won a race, all the sprint races and stuff you do in school. It wasn't until this opportunity came along where you run, like, I think the race is 2 miles or something like that, and I was like, actually I can just keep going. I don't think my parents were necessarily surprised when because I would be constantly running around, but the endurance side was always kind of what I was good at. So
then when you got in and you realised that, you got into obviously the competitive running side in comprehensive school, which for like those listening back home is high school. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of so as you know, the way it works in the UK is we have a club system, and we don't really do it through the high schools. It's not like you join your high school cross country team and then that's the majority of
class.
Yeah. So there are a couple of races like the Scottish schools and the British schools where you can race for your school, but other than that, it's just your club. And so I ran for City of Edinburgh, and it's all kind of a volunteer basis, really, the coaching and everything like that. And so Tuesdays, Thursdays, and in the evening, and then Saturday and Sunday morning, I would go into Edinburgh and meet my coach and meet my training partners, and we would do sessions, and then you can get home at around 9 o'clock and pretend to do some homework for 20 minutes and then go to bed and do it on the school bus on the way to school tomorrow the next morning.
So at that point, I guess when you get to like 15, 16, 17, you can drive around or whatever, are you thinking, what am I going to do in university? Am I going to go run competitively? Or are you like eyes set on Commonwealth and stuff like that at that point?
I kind of, I knew there were professional track runners. I didn't really, it seemed so far away that when I was in high school, early on in high school, I was far from academic. I was the one causing trouble and not being in class and getting into trouble in that, but in all sorts of ways. So it wasn't until we were actually on holiday in Florida and we were in these what seems like 18-hour lines for one ride, and there's a guy wearing an Arkansas track and field shirt. And my dad said to me, "What's Arkansas?"
Yeah.
Because we had actually never even heard of Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so reading it does read as
it totally
Arkansas.
does, yeah.
So, and we obviously knew of Kansas from movies and stuff like that. But and he kind of gave us a bit of a rundown on college and their scholarships and everything like that. And at first to us, it seemed like a bit of a scam.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to give you effectively like 50 grand a year, all this gear, free housing, all of this, and for you to run a few races for them. Yeah. It was like, I don't know, it seems a bit dodgy. We did some more homework on it, realised that it was a kind of a legitimate thing.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the kind of realization for me sunk in that like I'm way off here academically getting into any of these schools. I'm there physically, but I need to really knuckle down. So I kind of excluded everything else out of my life, kind of changed social circles, stuff like that, and made sure that I was wholeheartedly getting involved and making sure I could do everything I could do to get this scholarship. Did that. Wasn't very easy, but did it.
The SAT, right?
Actually, I did a year of university at home first.
Oh, okay.
So kind of came in the back door a little bit, which helped because the SAT would have been
I mean, I had to do it and I sucked at it. I did it 2 or 3 times, and I'm not a great test taker and not really like academically fun. I don't enjoy math, English, or any of the others. Right. But yeah, like the SAT was just a nightmare.
I think the American system is set up from day one to prepare them for this standardized test. Not so much like that in the UK. My younger sister, who ran at Tulsa as well, she had to sit at the SAT and an ACT to see which was better. And yeah, it was hard. I mean, it's another thing on your plate when you're studying for something, exams that are not that, and then you have to kind of also add in that as well. It's not easy, but it was. It all worked out in the end, and we kind of came out here, and my first kind of week at school, and they're like, okay, this is you're going to go here and you're going to pick up your stipend check. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, where do I have to work to get this stipend check? And they're like, no, it's part of the scholarship. It's part of the whole process. And I'm like, right, but like, where, like, do I have to work in the fitness center? Do I have to work in like the cafeteria? Like, where do I have to work? And they're like, no, you don't work. You just run. This is so you don't have to work. And I was like, oh wow, that's crazy.
Great, yeah.
That's crazy.
Thanks.
So that was a bit of a shock and a pleasant surprise. But yeah, it was definitely from where I was, and I wasn't good enough to be on. I wasn't good enough in the UK. I was kind of in the top 10, but normally somewhere between like 5th and 10th. So I wasn't good enough to be on their kind of junior progress track where they're funding stuff for you and helping you out. So coming to the NCAA was, for me, by far the best option.
It is a different world, and it's hard to explain to people back home, like friends who play golf, or friends who run for you. And just like, you don't understand. Like, and I was kind of late to it too. Like, I was 21 my freshman year, and I was lucky I had friends who'd gone and were already out here, and I kind of get the gist of it from them. But yeah, it's totally different back home, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just the system is not set up to be kind of athletically. I mean, it's not, they don't have the same industry. I mean, your revenue generating sports in the US are just as big as your professional sports. So we just don't have that. I mean, we barely have enough money for the professional sports in some instances.
So when you went to go through the NCAA clearinghouse, which is an absolute minefield as well, but you go through that and then you start getting offers. I mean, for golf, for me, it was like submit a video, but for you, it's clearly times, right? Yeah. So it wasn't too hard. You just say, here are my times, and then hope for people to give you offers. Yeah,
it's pretty cut and dry in track, and that's what I like about it is, there's only a couple of metrics. There's time and there's position. And so if you can prove that you can run fast but also win races, then whether that race is fast or slow, that's what coaches want. And I had offers from schools all over the country, kind of schools like Arkansas, who are power track and field schools, and then and then schools like Tulsa who are not, or who weren't anyway. And for me, it was I had worked so hard those couple years academically that I had gone from like not caring about academics at all to having to care about it out of necessity. And then it was, well, actually, I've kind of put all this work in. I don't want to go to a school where I'm just an athlete and don't get a valuable degree. And so the kind of stature, the power of the degree from TU was what kind of drew me in, as well as the coaching staff. I just clicked with them right away. And then it's a small school. I didn't want to go to, I had a propensity to get into trouble, so I didn't want to go to a school where I was in a class of 500 people, and it's kind of easier to get into trouble and harder to hold yourself accountable.
Right.
And I mean, having progressed all the way through to being an Olympian, I would have ran at T. I would, 9.9 times out of 10, I would pick Tulsa. And I'm still very happy with that decision. Yeah.
So you pick Tulsa, you jump on a plane. Does mum or dad come out with you when you fly out, or do you fly out on your own?
No, I flew out on my own, purely a cost thing. And I had never actually been. Same. I didn't take a visit.
Totally the same. Yeah.
And so the first time I flew in, and I signed with Tulsa, and then I started to tell people that I was going to Oklahoma, and they were like, well, have you ever been to Oklahoma? I was like, no.
Same.
And they were like, well, what do you know about it? I'm like, nothing, really. I've looked at it on Google Maps a little bit. And I was kind of expecting a barren wasteland of somewhat desert.
Right.
Because that's what I'd been told by people who had never been to Oklahoma either, and had no idea.
Seen it in movies and watched horses and carts,
exactly,
and Western movies or whatever. Yeah.
But when I flew in over Mohawk Park into Tulsa, I was like, oh, there's trees here. That's great. Granted, it was very hot, and I got lost on my first long run. My first run in Tulsa was a long run, and I was trying to kind of be tough and strong and kind of not be weak to my new teammates. And I was like, I'll go a bit further and I'll just take the next bridge back. And for those people who know Tulsa, there's up, and you can do a whole loop of the river in Tulsa. And I ended up taking a road bridge back, not a pedestrian bridge, or not one with a sidewalk, and lost the trail altogether. I was told, and then I found my way back to the trail, but started going the wrong way. So I was out for about 2 hours in the heat and just dying. And a cyclist passed me, and he was like, "You okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm really not. Cussing up a storm." And he's like, "Do you need a drink?" And I was like, "Please, mate, please." And he was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I'm trying to find my way back to Turkey Mountain car park." And he was like, "Okay, like, you're probably about 4 miles away. Just go the way I'm going. Follow me on the trail."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So I kind of plod back all the way up, and again, for those who know Turkey Mountain, the last part is like very steep uphill. And I get back to the car park, and all my teammates are like, "What happened? How can you get lost? How can you get lost on a river trail that's just a loop?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I've been delirious for the last hour, so I've no idea."
Yeah.
But I think I got home and called my mum, and I was like, "I'm coming home. I can't do it here. It's too hot. I don't want to get." And she was like, "Okay, go take a nap and speak to me in an hour or two." And I was fine, but it was an emotional first kind of 24 hours.
Yeah, for me, I hated my first month. It was just miserable. I missed home so much, and just a bunch of different things, right? And it's so different, and the heat is so different. You're not used to it, and you're just totally on your own as well. And for me, it was kind of a cost thing too. It's like I'm not, like, my parents aren't going to change my flight home because it costs too much money. Like, I'm here till Christmas.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny, like, everything you say, I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like, I didn't come on a visit either. I just came straight out, and my dad came with me, but that was the first time we'd both come to the States. Right. And it was a super weird experience. So you settle down freshman year. What's like first race like? What's the team like? Stuff like that.
Yeah, the team environment was pretty good. it's not as good as it is now. I help out with the team now, and the culture is so much better. Was a little bit toxic when I was there at my first couple of years, but it improved. But good. I mean, I went kind of straight into, because I transferred from the UK, I didn't have to live in student dorms.
Gotcha.
So I got to go straight into an apartment, which was a bit of a lifesaver, because I'd already lived away from home for a year. And so I didn't want to go back to like sharing a room with someone, but especially somebody I didn't know. But yeah, my flatmates, my apartment mates were great. Some of my best friends to this day still, and they kind of helped me through a lot. Just being like, kind of knowing where to, like, what stores to go to, or anything
simple
like
things,
that.
isn't it?
Simple
it's
things.
Not going to Walgreens and buying your entire shopping. You're like, no, go to Walmart instead.
Right. And knowing what Walmart's not to go to. Stuff like that. So, it was. I mean, I would have been very lost without Sam, my first roommate, or my first flatmate, and he was my teammate as well. But big culture shock, big temperature shock. I remember kind of coming home after like almost every class and changing my underwear and changing my shirt because I was just sweating. The sweat was lashing off me all the time. But I mean, I'd been hot places before. Commonwealth Youth Games, I'd had a race in India and it was hotter than hell there. And I'd been on holiday to Florida and Turkey and hot places, but it's different when you're sitting in the pool not doing anything versus like having to like go and get shopping, go and find furniture, go to class. And it's rubbish kind of walking 5 minutes to class and being drenched. So my first couple of days I had a clean shirt in my bag and I would put it on when I go to the bathroom, put my clean shirt on when I got to class, so I didn't sit there stinking up the whole room. But you slowly adapt.
You're right. Slowly you get used to it. But I mean, I'm sure initially you missed the kind of cold, fresh mornings of going for a run, right? Because I mean, today was kind of like that, but you don't really get that very often, especially in August. In September, it's a melting pot here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's very hot, and I kept kind of thinking, just like one more week, we're into October. Surely it'll get cold soon.
Still 85,
and it's like
90 degrees.
December, and I'm like, right, where's the bloody cold weather?
Yeah.
And then it hits, and you're like, holy, it's cold. It's very cold. Like, bring back the sunshine. Yeah. So yeah, there's not kind of that mild morning with a little bit of crisp air. It's kind of polar opposites here.
So freshman year was fine, like got settled into it, got into races, and how was like performance with the heat and stuff? Like, did it affect you early on, or was it just kind of just mental thing, got over it? A bit more of a mental thing. I mean, when you're running in it twice a day, every day, you adapt quite quickly. I came in with a bit, I say a bit, it was a serious injury, but it wasn't holding me out all the time. With my rib and my back, it was kind of not moving with the rest of my rib cage, and it was tearing me up. And so I could go for a couple of weeks, get some really good training in, and then I would do one session and it just would tear me up and I'd be out for a couple of weeks. So it was lots of back and forth. It was frustrating for me, frustrating for the coaches, because it wasn't like a torn hamstring or stress fracture where it was easy to diagnose and easy to treat. It was quite difficult. We were getting kind of varying diagnoses from different people, different training staff, different chiropractors who were all kind of telling me different things. It wasn't actually until I got back at Christmas time and saw a physio who was a rugby physio, and he saw a lot with people just getting smoked on the rugby field, and so he sorted me out, gave me the exercises to hold it together, and it got better from there. Had a pretty good indoor season, pretty good outdoor season. It wasn't until my sophomore year where I ran 3:56 for the mile and was second at NCAA champs, stuff like that, and then we kind of progressed from there. So that sophomore year was the breakthrough of like, okay, Chris is now on the scene. People are starting to know a lot more of who you are, and I mean, 3:56 for a mile, that's cooking. That's nuts, right? Like, that is flying. And then where was NCAA's that year that you came second?
That was in College Station, Texas A&M, and I Coach Gully at Tulsa had lots of success, but we were both kind of out of our depths a little bit. He'd had athletes compete NCAA championships before, but he'd never really had an athlete compete for a win, for a championship.
Yeah.
And so I said, what's the game plan? 15 minutes or so before, during my warm-up, 15 minutes before they take you out on the track. I'm like, what's the game plan? He's like, you know what to do. And I was like, yeah. And then I walked away from him. I was like,
no, I need a game plan.
I have no idea what I'm doing. I need a game plan. Sure, I've ran lots of races, but never of that kind of that caliber.
Yeah.
Then I was kind of out of my league, or felt like I was out of my league. And so just went to the front and tried to win it from the front, which for any listeners who are runners, that's the hard way to do it. I almost pulled it off. I lost by a couple tenths of a second. To the guy who was the favourite.
Did he sit on your tail the whole time and then come through?
Not quite. We were kind of there was 2 or 3 of us who were kind of chopping and changing the lead. I just didn't kind of want to give it up. And then the year after that, got my revenge, and that's when I won my first NCAA title. Doing the same thing, doing the same tactic. Coach was like, "Well, it worked last year," and I was like, "Well, we didn't because I got beat." And he was like, "Well, you're better than last year." I was like, "Okay, well, let's give it a shot and see what happens."
Then you lasted the 1500.
Just lasted,
Because when you research, you obviously did the 800 too, right? Which is the hardest thing to train for.
Yeah.
But my limited knowledge of running, the 800 is miserable to train for, right?
It's the mile is that kind of impossible mix of speed and endurance. But when you go to the 800, it's the impossible mix of speed, more speed, and some endurance. And so for 800 runners, for true 800 meter runners, they're like 800 meter runners, 400 meter runners.
Gotcha.
They're kind of
they don't
4-8 guys or 8-15 guys who kind of have very good natural speed. I'm more of a strength guy, kind of 5K-ish. Didn't actually run any 5Ks in college because we had 5K guys on the team. So I was kind of stuck in the 8-15 because I was good enough to be the 8-15 guy, and we didn't really have as many of those guys, so we needed the points there. I went to Tulsa as a 5K guy. That was my intention, was to be a 5,000 meter runner. And it wasn't until I ran 3:56 for the mile and went, it was the second fastest time in the nation that year or something. And coach was like, "Well, you're a miler now." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Okay. Didn't change training much. We were a pretty strength-based program, but it was a bit of a shock.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's when everything starts kicking off. You're on the scene. Does the GB&I start taking any notice? When does that come in to you? There's this guy in the States, which I'm sure there's a lot of you in the States, right? Same with golf, right? It is the best place to come for competitive college sports or that age, unless you've already made it from 18 years old or whatever. But so they clearly would have had an eye on you.
Yeah. British athletics at the time, it's a lot better now. At the time, it was, or I would say it's not a lot better, it's better now. British athletics at the time made it very, very difficult. They had no intention of making it easy for British people who were in the US, because you weren't doing it in their system. And there was lots of people in the organization at the time that were, their sole purpose was to keep their job. And their job was keeping athletes in the UK.
Gotcha.
And so they, in 2012, I think it was, might be wrong on the year, in 2012, I think, had ran the fastest mile/1500 time in Britain that year. And they picked 3 guys for the European indoors who were slower than me. The rationale being that I was tired from the NCAA season. And I'm like, well, you would know that I wasn't tired from the NCAA if you'd actually taken any time to consult with myself and my coach.
Exactly,
but they didn't. Slightly better now, but athletes that come to the US still face a bit of a struggle. They have to prove their selection beyond a doubt.
Gotcha.
Versus some athletes in the UK that get a little bit of leeway because they're in the system.
That's terrible, isn't it?
It's just sport politics that go on in every single sport. And unless
it happens in golf, you're right.
involved in the sport, you don't kind of get the intricacies. And for the most part, those athletes are scared to talk about it because you don't want to make it even more difficult for yourself.
Right. Because then if you speak up about it, then you're like blackballed for like ever. Then oh, he's kicking up a fuss. He's and then they can blame all the other things on you, right? And swing it any other way. So that's a bit of an issue to deal with, isn't it? Especially being halfway around the world. Like, I'm sure parents are kicking off, right? Because they're passionate, they know you're better than everybody else. But there's nothing they can do. There's nothing you can do from being in the States, and you're still going to school, and you have to compete as well as stuff like that. So, do you go home in this every summer as well to go run and events like that?
Yeah.
The schedule kind of match up a little bit.
Now, I mean, the state of British 1500 meter running is we are arguably one of the best countries in the world. And last year in Doha in the World Championships, we had 3 in the final. 3 Scottish guys actually in the final. There's like 5 or 6 of us in contention for the Olympic team, and probably even a bit more than that given another year, the younger guys have another year progression, and so there's probably 7 or 8 of us, 8 or 9 of us that could make the team. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting for fans. Whereas in kind of 2013 there was only really 2 of us. 2013, 14 and 15 there was only really 2 of us, and so all we had to do was run the time and be top 2 at the British Championships, and then that was it. Now the British Championships is a very intense ordeal, but it's kind of progressed the whole event. It's amazing
because now you, like I said, you have a bunch of people doing it. There's a lot of, especially in Scotland, obviously, if the top 3 guys are there, and the whole rising tide lifts all boats, right? Just to raise the level of competition, and it gets more funding, and people get into it more, and they get more buzz and excited about it, and there's nothing better than that. So you're at TU, things are going well. You graduate in 13?
Yes.
And then, what happens when you graduate? You're dating your girlfriend at the time. Do you go back home and train, or do you stay? How does that whole work out?
So I made the World Championships in Moscow when I was still in college. Okay. So it came back for one cross-country season after that, and then went pro after that. Been dating my girlfriend for a couple of years at that point, and when I signed my contract with Adidas, I went against the advice of every financial advisor ever, and the first thing I bought was an engagement ring.
Best decision ever, right? Yeah.
So that was the first thing, and she came across, her and her parents came across to watch me in the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. So that was kind of an incredible 10-day period with Commonwealth Games in my own country, and then proposed to my girlfriend with my family, and her parents were there as well. So that was quite a 10-day experience. And then then we obviously everybody came back, or my wife and family and I came back to Tulsa. Trained for a bit in Tulsa, trained for a bit in the UK, wherever races were. Kind of danced around the US to try out some different training groups. And then my wife and I moved to Boston at the end of 2014. That was where Adidas wanted me to be, and the coach was there, and then we lived in Boston for almost 4 years, but it got insanely expensive, especially after
it's not cheap, is it?
Ronan, our first son, was born. So we at that point kind of moved back, and some family help and some easier financial situation. And then now we have another son too.
That's so good, isn't it? So when you went pro, and you bounce around the States to find out, I guess, a good group, and then Adidas says no, we want you in Boston. Go to Boston, and then you're a pro, right? So you're traveling to events. What is the season of running? Obviously in golf, I know the golf one, but what is the running season like for you? Is it you all around the world? Are you mostly in the States? What was that like? So our kind of PGA tour is what's called the Diamond League. I can't remember how many there is off the top of my head. It kind of changes from year to year, but there's about 12, I think, events throughout the year, and they're all over the world.
And so the season, our indoor season, there isn't really a professional cross country season. If there are cross country races, but nobody really cares about
them that much. Not like a league or whatever.
It's not like right, and it's not like the NCAA cross country season, which is a big deal. That kind of goes from October to end of November. Then the indoor season is kind of January through March, middle of March. Outdoor season is kind of middle of April through. Yeah. The professional season can go all the way to October some years. Okay. And so, it's kind of indoors for a few months and then get ready for outdoors. And I love indoors. Indoors is great. Some people just don't run indoors at all. But it was normally kind of stay in the US for the most part for indoors, go back for British Championships or to qualify for World Indoors and European Indoors and stuff like that. And then outdoors, it's kind of like do a couple of races in the US, get your wheels turning, head into Europe. Whereas that's where the kind of main body of the track world is in the summer. Yeah.
Do your wife travel with you as well this time? Was she
we kind of went from just being married, and we were only married a year when Ronan was born. So we kind of never really actually got the opportunity for her to travel with me to races. So that summer in 2014 was really the only time she's ever been to a race outside of the US. She gets to travel up to New York and Boston and stuff like that, and bring the boys when I'm racing in the US. But I have always found it to be, or certainly when I was young, a few years younger, a bit stressful to have more people there. The more people that are at the meet, the more people you have to worry about.
You've got to get tickets and get people in.
Make sure they're there, make sure they're getting on the buses and stuff like that. So, now I'm just like, well, if you're there, you're there. If you're not, you're not. More important things to worry about now. But she's unfortunately not got to come to that many races, but fortunately has got to come to the kind of major ones in New York and stuff like that.
I mean, about those major ones, we've obviously got to touch on the fact that you made the Olympics. You're an Olympian, which is not many people can say that, and it's amazing that, to think of that when you put it into context. You're like, whoa, I'm an Olympian. Wow. What was that experience like, qualifying first and then obviously going there and being a part of that team?
Yeah, the qualification process is a stressful thing because you kind of prepare your whole season and you build it all up for the Olympics. And then kind of in the build up to the trials, you realize that if I don't get this right, there is no Olympics for me. Right. If I don't qualify, I'll be sitting at home watching the Olympics on the telly.
Watching my friends run.
Right. Yeah. And so that didn't strike me until probably a week, 10 days before. And you spend the next week to 10 days going, okay, you need to make this team, And then once the gun goes off, you're
in the zone. You're in
kind of autopilot, so to speak. You've got a plan. You need to execute the plan and get on with it. But then once you cross the line and you have qualified, you're like, okay, it's amazing. I've achieved my goal. And then you're like, wait a minute, no, I haven't achieved my goal. Yeah. I've just ticked off a box to get to achieve my goal. So, fortunately, I had a knee issue that was kind of misdiagnosed at first, struggled to get it right in the build up. So the 6 weeks leading into the Olympics were really tough. Didn't train nearly as much as I needed to. And so didn't make the final. Made it through from the prelim to the semi-final, but it all caught up with me in the semi-final. You can only kind of convince your body so much that you're ready to do it. And if you're not ready to do it because you've like the previous 6 weeks preparation's been buggered, then it's there's only so much the mind can do. But the experience as a whole was great. Kind of gave you a strange sense of worth just seeing the other people that are there, the people that you've kind of achieved. You've got to a level. It's weird to see like Michael Phelps in the cafeteria, and you're like, because you forget that those people are human, and so it's weird to see them doing the same things that you were doing. But no, I mean, it was great. We had to deal with Zika, so that was a bit of an unknown.
Did everyone just kind of get vaccines and stuff? Like, how does that? I mean,
no, there wasn't a vaccine.
That's right.
It was
you're right.
I mean, God knows what chemicals they were spraying, but every morning, if you were up early enough, every morning you could see these guys going around spraying chemicals all over the village, and you were like, that can't be good for us.
Yeah, running in that's not good.
That and then kind of just the level of crime that is in Brazil is quite astonishing. So the kind of security threat that was constantly present, they were like, don't wear if you're going out of the village, don't wear your gear.
Yeah.
If you're going to the beach, don't wear Olympic gear. Like, if you've already got the Olympic tattoos, like, wear a shirt, blah, blah, blah. Like, discourage anybody from understanding that you are an Olympian.
Yeah.
Trying to blend in as much as possible.
Yeah.
Right, which was weird. But just part of the game ultimately.
Yeah. So when you fly down there, what's the village? I mean, the village is like that, but what else was the village like? I mean, you've got obviously all of your team, all the GBNI and everything's together, but what was it like? Other than waking up early and seeing people spraying stuff and security.
A bit strange because there's an underlying, there's like two groups of people. The people who are yet to compete, and they've got this underlying tension. Everybody's kind of walking around with their fists clenched, like not really knowing what to do, not wanting to do anything that'll harm their chances. And then the people who are done competing. So like the swimmers are done first. That's what always kicks off the Olympics. So after the first like 6 or 7 days, they're done. So by the time we even came from the training camp to the village, the swimmers were already done. So they're going crazy, partying every night, loud as anything. And you're like, we get there and we're like, would you please be quiet, because we are trying to compete.
That's hilarious. You wouldn't, I'd never think of that. I'd never think that you're all in this and you have people like, oh, we're done now, so we're just going to have a great night and stay up till 4 a.m. and listen to music all night. Like,
exactly. It's a strange, and they do a very good job of logistically of keeping people on different floors, keeping people aside, and reminding people who are finished that, look, you wouldn't have liked it 10 days ago if people were being loud when you were trying to compete. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, the cleanliness of the village is the hard part. I mean, every day you wake up to a new notice on your door from the team doc, or a WhatsApp message from the team doc say like, this is the new strain of stomach virus that's going around. This is the new strain of this that's going around. Because you've brought in all of these countries
from all around the world to one melting pot
with different levels of sanitation, different levels of kind of cleanliness, and that's difficult. The dining room the dining hall is huge. It's open 24 hours a day, but you sit down and they're like, you have to use, like, make sure you only use plastic cutlery that's in a plastic bag. Yeah. Because we can't guarantee that the water they used to clean the cutlery is clean. Yeah. So only use plastic plates, only use plastic cutlery in plastic bags. You're like, we're single-handedly destroying the planet with
like
one village worth
athletes,
of plastic plates.
And
you're trying to cut a piece of chicken with your knife's breaking and stuff like that. So it's just a lot of different, people who've been to the Olympics before will tell you there's a lot to take in. And you're like, well, sure, whatever. Like, well, how hard can it be? It's not until you're done with it that you're like, oh, that was kind of exhausting. Just being in the village is a bit exhausting.
After this,
So that is tough, but all part of the experience.
What was the opening ceremony like? I mean, everyone will most likely know that they throw parties in Rio and it's known for some of the best places to party or whatever in the world, but as an athlete, what was that like going in and to the stadium and everything
we were
else?
Still on holding camp.
Okay.
They hold you in holding camps for multiple reasons, but one of the reasons was that the village wasn't actually finished.
Oh, nice.
So there wasn't actually the amount of apartment.
Gotcha.
There wasn't as many beds as they said there was going to be. So there were people who had to, lots of team staff for the swimming team.
Right.
That as soon as the swimmers were done, they had to leave.
They were out. Yeah.
to make way for the other athletes and team staff coming in. So we watched it in like a movie theater at the holding camp in a place called Belo Horizonte.
So you never got to walk through and
no.
with the team?
That being said, we weren't that bothered about it because it's a lot of time on your feet.
Sure.
Because we went to the closing ceremony and it's like a 6-hour deal of being held in pens to then usher you out, and you're on your feet for a long time. So lots of people opt, even people who are in the village opt not to go to the opening ceremony.
Is everyone in the closing ceremony just drinks the flow and having a great time because they're done?
Yeah, pretty much.
I figured. Like you've been pent up for this so much time. Like it's time to let go and let loose, and the fans are there and having a great time. Wow, what an experience. Did family get to come and enjoy it with you or not?
Yeah, my parents and my brother came. My younger brother, with my older brother, was working, and my younger sister was at University in Tulsa. Yeah. So she had to be back at school, and so yeah, my family and my parents and my younger brother came, which was great because I took it pretty hard. With my performance not being what I wanted it to be was emotionally quite difficult, and so to have them there to get out of the village, go to Copacabana Beach, stuff like that, and play in the ocean with my brother, it just kind of brings you back to a normality and brings you out of reminds you that actually, yes, the whole world was watching this Olympics, but as soon as you're done, nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares at all. So,
and you go from like having been in the same cafeteria hall as Michael Phelps to like, actually, I'm going on the beach with my brother and throwing around. You're like, okay, like I'm back to some normality now. Is there any other people that, obviously you mentioned Phelps, are there any other people that stood out to you that were like, well, I mean, they're a god? Or like, I need to go take a picture with that person or meet them? Yeah,
no, not really. I kind of struggle with the kind of status of people. Sure. Like I'm not really that bothered with getting pictures with people or anything like that. It's kind of like, well, there's just, my dad has a phrase like, everybody is.
You're right. Yeah.
And so it's true, and that's helped me. That's helped me in the past with kind of getting to a level to beat people, because I was never scared of anyone, so to speak. It was not really that bothered. I did see, now I can't remember his name. The guy who got in trouble for the swimmer. Who got in trouble.
What's his name? I know you're talking
Ryan
about.
Lochte.
Yes, that's him, I
did see him come back in that morning, the morning that all the stuff kicked off. And he looked terrible. And he ran, he was running through the village with stuff. And I was like, what is going on with him? And then it transpired later in the day that he was in jail trouble,
or whatever.
Right.
He was getting picked up.
Yeah.
That's chaos, isn't it? So that happens. That's 2016. 5 years later, you go back to Tulsa and hang out and still running competitively. Obviously, it's a bit of a, you're up here and you're at the Olympics, and then you're like, I either have to train for another 4 years or I'm just going to, see where I'm at. What happens after that? What are you thinking? And then you moved back to Tulsa, I guess? Or were you still in Boston?
Yeah, I was still in Boston for another year. The good thing with track with track and field is that we have either a World Championships or European Championships or Commonwealths every year. And so because Europeans are every 2 years, Commonwealths are every 4 years, but 2 years offset from the Olympics, and then World Championships are every 2 years offset from Europeans. So it's there's always something. So as soon as you get done, which is good, because in a time where you're disappointed with a performance like the Olympics, you go, okay, let's get ready, and we've got World Championships next year.
The last thing we're doing is sat around waiting, and training for 2 years instead of training for something next year.
So the sports, I do feel for the sports that only have the Olympics, and that's I'm sure there's World Championships and stuff like that, but the Olympics is held to so much higher of a standard. In track and field, it's kind of like the World Championships are the same as the Olympics. It's got a bit more of kind of status symbol to it.
And you're always competing against the same sort of crowd.
It's the same guys.
Or you've already, you're right.
Yeah.
So training for those, just, up in Boston, and got the 1-year-old and another one on the way, I guess.
Yeah. So I did the first year that Ronan was born was hard because Meredith went back to work, my wife went back to work, and so I bought a treadmill for our living room of our basically 1-bedroom apartment in Boston. So much to my wife's dismay that the treadmill was the focal point of our living room.
Not the baby's crib.
No, but I was running about 80 miles a week on my treadmill in my living room with Ronan just sitting there. But it did teach me a lot. Obviously, having a child teaches you a lot in every regard. But as an athlete, it taught me a lot because, you know, if a day was supposed to be an easy 8 miles in the morning and an easy 4 miles in the afternoon. It was kind of a recovery day to get ready for a workout the next day. And I would feed Ronan, put him down for a nap. Yeah. And the noise of the treadmill, the repetitive noise of the treadmill would normally keep him asleep. Yeah. Some days it wouldn't. And so he'd wake up and I'm like, okay, well, try and get back to sleep. And he wouldn't. And I'm like, okay, my morning run is shot. Done. Yeah. So instead of having my morning run done and only needing the afternoon run done when my wife got home from work, I would need to do 10 or 11 miles in the evening on the treadmill. And fortunately, the old couple that lived underneath us were pretty understanding of the treadmill, footsteps on the treadmill pounding, knocking dust from their ceiling, I'm sure, for an hour and 10 minutes. But that was just kind of the way it went. And on track days, I would take Ronan with me to we would use the Harvard indoor track, and I would take him with me to the track. And some days he would fall asleep in the car and sleep the whole time. And then I would feed him a bottle before weights, and then go straight to weights, and he would sit there with his bottle and drink his water, his milk, or some days he would scream and scream and scream and scream. I mean, one day he would not be quiet. I was through the first rep. It was just me and him at the track. The rest of my group was away on a training camp that I had opted out of because of Ronan. Right. And he was screaming bloody murder. And so the janitor of the track actually came out and said, do you need me to like push him around or hold him or anything? Yeah. And normally my initial response would be like, nah mate, you're good, I've never even seen you before. But I'm thinking like, okay, this indoor track's 200 meters around, like I can pretty much see him the whole time. Yeah. And I'm pretty fast, so I can catch him if need be. Right. And so I'm like, if you wouldn't mind me, that would be great. And he was probably 65, Jamaican guy. And he was like, yeah, no problem. And he just sat there and talked to him and bounced him around for the next 45 minutes while I'm tearing around the track. And I was like, thank you so much. Like,
same again tomorrow.
See you on Friday, will you? And it's funny. I mean, you know, I never thought that I would do that. And if somebody had said to me that they did that with their child, I'd be like, you're daft, mate. You're crazy. Yeah. But
what did Meredith think when you said that?
I'm not sure if I told her immediately. I'm not sure if I told her right away. But normally my coach would hold him if he was crying. Right. But when they were gone, I had to make do. But
that's hilarious.
Crazy times.
Yeah. So I guess now to present day, you're back living in Tulsa. Have you kind of officially retired, or are you still competing or running? Like how transitioning into, I guess, back to normal life now? Working?
Still running. Okay. Still under contract with Adidas. Fortunately, I'm still running. I just went under hip surgery to have a labral tear repaired, and what's called a FAI I can't remember. Which way the letters go around, hip impingement syndrome, where they basically just shave off some of the bone so that your hip moves a bit more freely, which isn't much fun. It wasn't much fun, but
sounds excruciating.
I'm about 9 weeks post-surgery now, and it's amazing because I can bend down to put my shoes on, which I haven't been able to do properly for the last kind of 2 years. I've been dealing with it on and off for about 2 years. So that was nice to be able to like just kneel down and put my shoes on and tie them properly instead of having to put myself into strange positions to tie my shoes. And it's a bit, I mean, it's a weird thing to say to someone like, yeah, I was running 350 odd, 352, 353 for the mile, and 332 for the 1500, and couldn't tie my shoes properly. But that's just the way it goes.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of,
I can't bend over, but I can run. That's all I need to do.
Athlete lifestyle, so to speak.
Yeah.
As long as it was sore for the rest of the day, but I could do enough activation and mobility and stuff before I ran that I could run. And then you just live for the rest of the day with the slight pain. But it got to the point where I just couldn't live with the pain for the rest of the day, and couldn't even run properly anymore. So we had to get the surgery. It's a long process to come back from the surgery, but I'm ahead of schedule, and I think in the next kind of 2 or 3 weeks I'll be back to running. Getting proper running done in the pool and on the anti-gravity treadmill, and a little bit on the ground.
What's that like, being in the pool doing that? Like, that must seem...
It's odd.
It looks awful.
It's odd, and you're not moving exactly the same way as you would be on the ground.
But I guess it's just stimulating muscles, and it's a bit of a workout, isn't it?
And a lot of the problem, or a lot of what you have to do with the hip surgery, is the hip has to keep moving.
Gotcha.
I mean, within hours after the surgery, I think a couple hours after I woke up, they have you on the static bike.
Yeah.
So you're not even fully with it yet, and you've got 2 physical therapists like holding you on the bike while you spin your legs, and you're like half drunk, but you got to get the fluid moving. You got to get the joint back to movement. The longer it stays stagnant, the worse it will be. So it's just lots of time in the gym, for 2 to 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours a day, doing what I need to do in the gym, and then get back to being a dad.
That's mad, isn't it? So what are you preparing for now? Like, so once this gets back to like goal set on a certain race?
Ultimately, the game plan is to get back for the Olympics.
Sure.
If the Olympics go ahead, I at this point doubt that they will. And there's varying opinions on that. The Japanese government are still pretty steadfast on the fact that it is going ahead, but there's lots of money for them to lose if it doesn't. So I struggle with the logistical side of it, whether logistically they can make it happen, and then also the kind of, lots of people have lost jobs by that time. People will have been out of work for over a year. People are really struggling. Small business owners are struggling to keep their employees paid. Even big businesses are struggling to keep their employees paid. So I'm not sure the kind of, it's good for morale, it's good for people love sport. I'm not sure if they love sport that much
to see all these athletes
they can that we can really justify a worldwide sporting event. A bit different with a bubble NBA or the NFL.
Sure.
Even soccer back home in the UK, that's pretty kind of contained.
It's weird watching it. They're playing under their own no fans or whatever in the sounds, but you're right, because it's the grand scheme of things, in the world or whatever. Okay, if we miss the Olympics, fine. It's money to somebody that's not gonna, someone's gonna lose money, but the people who are losing money this is me just spitballing, right? But I think that obviously the world's health is more important, isn't it?
Right.
So, but you've still got to train. If they keep telling you, hey, it's going to happen, you can't just like, I should start training now because it is on or whatever. Yeah,
that's it. I think there will be some athletes out there that have used it as an excuse that are like, it's not going to happen. And then if it does happen, they're like, I just didn't think it was going to happen, so I wasn't ready for it. They were probably not going to be the people who made the Olympic team anyway. And, to the world's health, I think it's kind of one of those things that's like, I think we could have a healthy games. I don't think it's logistically impossible to have a healthy games.
Right.
It's just whether or not it's kind of morally sound too. That's a condition that I think is probably being overlooked. But I would be pretty mad if I lost my job and couldn't find another job, or I'm working 2 or 3 jobs to try and support my family, and then whilst doing everything safely. Or if I was a small business owner that's like, I've lost almost everything, I'm struggling to keep my employees paid. and then they are just like, yeah, sure, we'll
turn
have an
on the
Olympics.
TV or whatever and see like you guys running around the track or swimming and like, well, this is totally off and different. We shouldn't be doing that.
And I don't think being an elite athlete is a good enough reason to jump the queue for vaccines and jump the queue for medical treatment.
That is a great point. I totally agree with you. So training for this Olympics coming up, and then obviously living back in Tulsa now. You said you're still doing stuff with the team. You mentioned your younger sister Rand. Is she still in town or is she back home?
She's back in Edinburgh.
Okay.
Yeah, she went back to Edinburgh when she was done with college. So we've been back in Tulsa for a few years now. We moved back in 2017, end of 2017, and it's great. I love Tulsa. I mean, I think I love Oklahoma as a whole. I think Tulsa's a great city. It's especially, with new stuff like the Gathering Place and stuff like that. I mean, we're at the Gathering Place almost every week
with the kids. Yeah, but they love it,
and they love it. And it's like Disneyland. It's incredible. So we're incredibly lucky to have, all the fitness trails and all the bike trails and the river parks and Gathering Place, and it's a great place. I love it.
Awesome. Well, mate, I can't thank you enough for, I'm glad we managed to do this. Glad you're in town for a meeting and we could make this happen before you head back. For everyone listening, where can they kind of follow you? If they want to bug you for tips and stuff on running, how can they do that as well?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the easiest. I don't even know what my Instagram handle is.
Look it up real quick.
It'll probably be Chris O'Hare 1500 because that's normally what I am for everything.
Okay.
But
you're right, Chris O'Hare 1500.
There you go. Yeah. So feel free to
good follow.
Shoot me a message or whatever. I'll normally get back to people.
And then you said you've been doing some podcasting, right, with mates from back home?
Yeah.
Runners from back home?
Yeah. Just pretty running specific ones. Got a good friend that I've known since we were very young, Sean Fontana. He's a personal trainer back in Scotland and does a lot of online stuff. So whether you're from, which is the great thing about YouTube, whether you're from Oklahoma or you're down the road in Glasgow or Edinburgh, you can watch Sean do his stuff, which is great.
Have you thought about, before we finish, just one thing I thought of, have you thought about dabbling in any other things? Like, I mean, a lot of runners that I know get into triathlons and doing stuff. Is that something that interests you later on in life?
Yeah, maybe. Kind of. I hate swimming with a passion. Yeah. I've had to swim a lot with this hip injury, and I dread every single minute of it.
Yeah.
But I like being out on the bike. It's nice to be outside. Any more than 5 minutes on the bike in the gym, I'm ready to blow my brains out. But I can be out for hours and hours and hours on the bike outside. So I don't know. I mean, I think the longer you're in a sport professionally, the less likely you are to do it recreationally after. Being a competitor, I'm sure I'll compete in
something,
whatever I choose to do.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to do some five-side football and stuff that you can't do without breaking a leg. So.
Stuff that you can't risk when you're in college or a scholarship or a contract with Adidas, right? Otherwise you end up like Rory McIlroy before the Open one year. He breaks his ankle for playing at St Andrews. Clown.
Right.
Well, mate, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming down. For everyone listening, I'll post the links to Chris's Instagram down below in the description. You can go and follow him. Great follow. And thanks for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
This podcast was presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who've been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof. Catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.